All right, so today I'm giving you 8 players in Dynasty Fantasy Football that you should target right around mid-season before your trade deadline. These players are all in either not great situations for this year or are injured and have a much brighter future. And so, right around mid-season, players should either be concerned about them if they're not quite as informed, or they may be worried about their win now production and be willing to sell these players for a discount for something that might be able to help them right now, but might not be good for them in the future. So I think right around mid-season, these players are going to be as cheap as they're going to be for the foreseeable future. Now, one thing I can't control is whether or not your league mates know this, but if your league mate might not know this, you can take advantage of that and get somebody for relatively cheap considering what you'll have to pay eventually. The first player is DJ Moore. He is a little bit past the age apex of 26, but he's still only 27 years old. He's coming off a wide receiver 6 finish, and so I think his value was a little bit inflated until they drafted Rome Odunze. Now I think people are kind of freaking out a little bit because they have Keenan Allen now and Rome Odunze. Next season, however, Keenan Allen is most likely gone. He's on a 1-year deal and he's already 32 years old, so historically he should have already been declining. However, he's a fantastic player, so it didn't really hit this past season. This season we'll have to see though. Now, as far as being an athlete, he is a top tier athlete. His 4.42 40-yard dash is in the 89th percentile. His 108.5 speed score is also in the 89th percentile. His 133.2 burst score, which is his vertical and broad jump, is in the 93rd percentile. His 11.02 agility score is in the 76th percentile. And his 10.25 catch radius is also in the 89th percentile. So 89th percentile or better in 4 of these 5 categories and well above 50th percentile in every single one. This guy is a top tier athlete. A couple of other stats to like from this past season: his 0.49 fantasy points per route run was good for 16th in the NFL. Now, keep in mind, that was with Justin Fields throwing on the ball. Now he has Caleb Williams. And now we don't know for sure whether Caleb Williams is going to hit yet, but he looks pretty good in the preseason. And it's not that, he's beating up against, third string scrubs. It's the plays he was making are plays that just about no one could make in the NFL. Maybe Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen. How many players have you seen make a jump man throw 40 yards down the field with perfect accuracy while rolling to the left as a right-handed quarterback? Exactly. Getting back to DJ Moore, his fantasy points per target of 2.11 was also good for 14th. What that means is on a per target and per out basis, this guy is absolutely fantastic. Also considering he had Justin Fields throwing in the ball once again. When we look at his yards per team pass attempt, his 2.66 was good for 5th. That stat is highly correlated to being a very, very good player. And when we look at their depth chart once again, yeah, they have Caleb Williams at quarterback, so that's looking great. DeAndre Swift is signed for 3 seasons. He's probably going to end up playing 2 of those, but we'll see. Once again, DJ Moore is probably the number 1 receiver right away, but he also has to contend with Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen. Rome Odunze, I project to be their X receiver, and DJ Moore, I project to be usually their flanker. So I think both of them will be starting in 2 wide receiver sets. Now, at tight end, they have Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett, so it is a little bit crowded, but once Keenan Allen's out of here, Rome and DJ Moore are easily going to be the top target earners, and he's going to be connected to what at least I project to be a fantastic quarterback for many, many years. He was just signed to an extension, so you don't have to worry about him getting Garrett Wilson or really before this past couple of seasons, DJ Moore. DJ Moore was the receiver that was a fantastic receiver with no good quarterback play. Now he's at least projected to have insane quarterback play for the foreseeable future. This guy is not going to be performing anywhere close to how talented he is for most weeks this season, I project. And so I think you can get him for much, much cheaper right around the trade deadline. The second player on this list is Rome Odunze, also of the Chicago Bears, and for the exact same reasons as DJ Moore. Yes, it's an immediately crowded situation. They do have Keenan Allen there. However, the exact same argument can be made for Rome Odunze. If you remember from my Rome Odunze video a couple days ago, wide receivers drafted inside the top 10 have a 50% chance historically of being either an elite wide receiver one or a low end to mid wide receiver one. There is roughly historically a 50% chance that this guy is a stud. And he's also connected to, once again, Caleb Williams. So I personally think he's incredibly talented, and he's going to be in a fantastic situation next year. When we look at his metrics, his 4.45 40-yard dash is in the 80th percentile. His 111.1 speed score is in the 94th percentile. His 128.3 burst score is in the 83rd percentile. His 10.91 agility score is in the 86th percentile. And his 10.39 catch radius is in the 97th percentile. So this guy is an 80th or better percentile athlete in every one of these metrics. His size-adjusted speed is crazy. This guy is 6'3", 212 with a 4.45 40-yard dash. I can't understate how awesome that is. But if that wasn't enough to convince you, he was open 80% of the time on 8 of the 11 route types this past season. If you look at the route chart from Matt Harmon of Reception Perception, he was above average in every single one of them. He was the first rookie he's ever scouted to have a fully grain route tree. Keep in mind, that is better than Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. This guy is a better all-around receiver. While he isn't per se as technically sound in his releases and his route running as Marvin Harrison Jr., or as bursty and explosive as Malik Neighbors, he is, in my opinion, the best all-around receiver in terms of his release package, route running, contested catch ability, and just like with Marvin Harrison Jr., he is an X. That means he is going to be on the field at all times, at least this next season. I do project him to be starting in 3 wide receiver sets, obviously, but I also think he's going to be in 2 wide receiver sets as the X this season. It does remain to be seen, and I'll be curious week 1 how they deploy him. But let's say that he's not in 2 wide receiver sets at the beginning of the year. Even better for you, because he's a top 10 draft pick. It's better for you if you don't have him, if he underperforms immediately, because then maybe somebody will panic sell and allow you to get him. Take that and laugh for years in Dynasty. And to wrap up Rome Odunze here, he was 87th percentile in success versus man coverage, 81st in success against zone, 92nd percentile against press coverage, and had a 77% success rate when doubled, although he didn't face double coverage that often. Another thing, he isn't the best yards after catch guy. In this class, it's obviously Malik Neighbors, if you've looked at any highlights even, let alone scouted him. But people make it out like he's just this... They make it out like he's Chris Olave. He broke a tackle on 50% of the passes he caught in open space. Now, the problem for him was that, and it wasn't a problem because he was successful, is he was targeted with an extremely high ADOT, average depth of target, down the field. That makes it harder to break tackles because you're having to high point the ball, for instance. It's not like you're being set up like Malik Neighbors was with a little bit of a shorter ADOT. So that is one thing to consider here. And once again, just looking at the raw stat of total yards after catch, you need to be able to contextualize it and understand why it's the case. Once again, he might be the wide receiver 3 of this class, but this guy would be the wide receiver 1 in a lot of classes. The next player here is Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. Just like with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, he finds himself in a crowded space. They traded for Stephon Diggs. Now, what they did do, however, is they voided his contract so that he only has 1 year left on his deal now. He is a little bit older now, and over the latter half of this past season, he was showing, in my opinion, pretty clear signs of at least a little bit of regression. Although he did have a lot of unrealized air yards, so it was a little bit deceiving, and it wasn't quite as bad as it looked like if you just look at the raw numbers. But he was declining, in my opinion, just a little bit. But what does that do? It suppresses Nico Collins' value this season. He's likely to be relatively streaky. However, when we look at his yards per out run from this past season, his 3.24 was good for second in the entire NFL. His formation adjusted yards per out run of 2.93 was good for second. And his fantasy points per target of 2.39 was good for third in the entire NFL. I will say his success rate overall and versus man coverage was pretty poor, as well as his contested catch rate. So I think he's a little bit above average in terms of general X wide receivers. However, being connected to CJ Stroud is a fantastic thing, especially in this scheme, courtesy of Bobby Slowick. Now, Bobby Slowick could potentially leave for greener pastures in the future, but what I suspect they'll do is probably try to keep Stroud in the same scheme. I doubt they're going to want to throw away all the progress they've made with him, but that is something to consider. When we look at Nico Collins' metrics, his 4.50 40-yard dash is in the 69th percentile, giving him a 109.2 speed score, which is in the 90th percentile, a 126.3 burst score, which is in the 75th percentile, an 11.11 agility score, which is in the 67th percentile, and a 10.33 catch radius, which is in the 95th percentile. So in terms of being an athlete, he's a much better than average athlete. If the owner of Nico Collins in your league right around mid-season is worried about the pendulum of outcomes week to week with Nico Collins, take advantage of that. And you'll notice a common theme here, just like with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, this pair of Texans wide receivers are fantastic buy low candidates mid-season. So Tank Dell is 5'8", 165. Now, his 4.49 40-yard dash is in the 71st percentile, but because he's only 165 pounds, that does give him a 6th percentile speed score. He's plenty fast, and it didn't hamper him in any way, shape, or form. In fact, not only did he meet expectations, he far surpassed them. And CJ Stroud was the one who clamored for them to draft him. So he plans on getting him the ball, let's just say. I mean, a couple of stats here. His 2.36 yards per out run were good for 14th as a rookie. His 2.07 formation adjusted yards per out run were good for 13th. And his 2.20 fantasy points per target were good for 10th. One commonality here is both of these receivers are above average. It's that they're connected to a stud like CJ Stroud that allows them to be this efficient. And while year to year volatility could be a factor somewhat, it's no accident that these players were this efficient. It's likely to be somewhat similar from year to year. What are the chances that essentially all these, especially the random receivers like Noah Brown having over 150 yards in a game, what are the chances that that just randomly happened? Less than 0. And so just like with Nico Collins, all you need to do is wait for a perfect buy low dip week, snag him, and then next season you'll be laughing. The next wide receiver and the final wide receiver on this list, I also have a couple of other positions, is Jackson Smith-Njigba of the Seattle Seahawks. So this guy is 6 foot 196. Now, he isn't the fastest and doesn't have the best speed score, but that's not his game. Look at his agility score. His 10.50 is in the 99th percentile. This guy is your classic slot receiver. However, he is absolutely talented enough to win at X and as a flanker. People want to act like as the third wide receiver behind talented wideouts like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, like over 60 catches for 600 yards and 4 touchdowns is terrible. We have been spoiled by the likes of Puka, Jefferson, and Chase, wide receivers who found themselves in wide open receiving rooms connected to fantastic quarterbacks. Not every wide receiver is going to be in the best situation immediately. A couple of stats to like besides the 99th percentile agility. His 52.7 overall win rate was good for 17th in the entire NFL. His 41.2% win rate versus man was good for 26th among all wide receivers. That's pretty good. Then you look at his target separation of 2.32. That was 6th in the entire NFL. Now, to contextualize that, he did have a little bit lower of an ADOT, average depth of target, but you're not 6th in the NFL if you're a scrub. That's just not how it works. When we look at the situation now, he has Geno Smith, not the best, but you could definitely do worse. And he still has DK Metcalf there. The thing to note, though, is Tyler Lockett, first of all, restructured his contract, But then second of all, this guy is 31 years old, and he is steadily declining. The last 2 seasons, he's gotten worse. JSN, however, was very good this past season. Fun fact, he was the first rookie wide receiver in the modern NFL to have 2 game-winning touchdowns. So on top of having over 60 catches, 600 yards, and 4 touchdowns as the third wide receiver behind 2 talented wideouts, he had 2 game-winning touchdowns. What does that tell you? When it mattered most, who did they go to? JSN. Tyler Lockett is probably gone after this next season, and I do project JSN at least some point during the season, if not right away, to take over Tyler Lockett's role. He was much more efficient with his targets. Look at his targets and receptions and yards per game compared to Tyler Lockett's. Look how much more efficient he was with them. Buy the dip on JSN. This guy is going to be a PPR monster in the future. Getting on to a different position, now we have a running back in Jalen Wright. Now, I did make a video a couple days ago detailing out why I think he's a great player. And I think you should get him, and he's a really good value. But I love Jalen Wright, so here we go again. So he's 5'11", 210 pounds. If you watched the other video I just made about him, he is the Raheem Mostert replacement. When you look at his athletic profile, holy smokes. His 4.38 40-yard dash is in the 98th percentile, giving him a speed score of 114.1, 95th percentile, and a 131.6 burst score, which is in the 95th percentile. This guy is an elite athlete. In Miami, Raheem Mostert is 32. Devon Achane is less than 190 pounds. You do the math. A couple of advanced stats to like. He averaged 4.3 yards per carry after initial contact. He also escaped 43 tackles and totaled 592 yards after evading the first defender this past season. He also had 9 rushes of 15 plus yards. Only 15 other running backs this past season were able to do that, but none of them did it with under 150 attempts like Wright. Another thing to like, his 9.75 out of 10 RAS score, relative athletic score, was good for 44th out of 1,745 running backs from 1987 to this year. And his 11.2 broad jump is the second highest ever recorded by a running back at the combine, which factors into his elite burst score, which is your mark of vertical and broad jump combined. When we look at the depth chart, he has a 32-year-old Raheem Mostert, and Achane is sub 190 pounds. By the way, they traded up to draft this man. They're going to use him. Get this man while you can. I would advise doing so sooner rather than later. But if Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane have managed to stay healthy right around the trade deadline, make your move. Now, this is if you're in Superflex. If you're not in Superflex, I would rather have a lot of other quarterbacks, but for Superflex purposes, J.J. McCarthy. So this guy's 6'3", so he is tall enough to see over the middle of the field. He was drafted 10th overall, so pretty high draft capital. He's absolutely going to get multiple chances to start. And he's only 21 years old. This guy was one of the youngest prospects in the class. Then when we look at his metrics, his 4.57 40-yard dash is in the 94th percentile among quarterbacks, and his agility score of 11.05 is in the 90th percentile. Most people wouldn't expect him to be this good of an athlete, but he is. He is a very solid scrambler, and he can run the read option. There is rushing upside with him. One fun fact, his 80% adjusted completion percentage is second highest in the class. Now, let's think about his situation, right? He did tear his meniscus and he had to have surgery, so he's out for the entire season. One way to look at that, though, is it's like he's being given a chance to sit for 1 year and observe, because, I mean, he is. That worked out for Mahomes, and now while I don't think he's going to be Mahomes, not even remotely close to the same type of player, there is one silver lining to him not playing this season. When we look at his situation, they have a very solid offensive line. They're going to have Aaron Jones maybe next season. Worst case scenario, it's not like the next running back class is supposed to be really good. Oh, wait, it is. Then they have Justin Jefferson, they just extended. They have Jordan Addison as long as he can stop getting arrested. They're going to have TJ Hawkinson back. He is going to be in a fantastic situation for a long, long time. And people are going to either forget about it or potentially undervalue him because he's not giving you win now production. Take advantage of that. The final player we'll be discussing today is Ben Sinnott of the Washington Commanders. He is, in my opinion, most likely to be by far the cheapest option out of all these players. My comparison for him is a baby George Kittle. So he's 6'4", 250 pounds. He's 22 years old. However, for a tight end, that's still relatively young. Players like Dalton Kincaid were practically 24 years old when they were rookies. So he has plenty of time to get better. When you look at his metrics, his 4.68 40-yard dash is in the 77th percentile. His 103.7 speed score is in the 76th percentile. But here's where it gets really good. His 133.0 burst score is in the 98th percentile. His 11.05 agility score is in the 95th percentile. And his 10.36 catch radius is in the 96th percentile. A couple of advanced stats to like here. His yards after catch of 6.8 was good for 8th among tight ends. His career yards per reception of 14 was good for 3rd among tight ends. His yards per out run of 6.8 was also good for 8th. And his yards per team pass attempt of 1.86 was good for 3rd among all tight ends. When we look at their depth chart, they have Jaden Daniels. Now, before the draft, I was a little bit skeptical and it wasn't so much him as I was really worried about the O-line. And I thought that the playmakers around him were lacking pretty much. I still think that's the case, and I do worry, but he's looked really good. And just like with Caleb, we do need to see it before we crown him a good quarterback. But he looks pretty good, and I hope I'm wrong about him. He looks like he's going to be really good. When we think about their situation, they have Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. So a decent running back in Brian Robinson and an over-the-hill but used to be elite back in Austin Eckler. Then we have Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 1. Thank goodness for him. He's finally at least looking like he's going to have a good quarterback. Thank you. But they traded away John Dotson, who I thought was a little bit... At first, after his rookie season, he was overrated because he happened to have 7 touchdowns, but then he's a little bit better than last season suggested. But he's gone now. They have Zacchaeus, Luke McCaffrey, De'Ami Brown. Do any of those players strike fear in your heart? No. Then you have Zach Ertz. Trey McBride kicked him out of Arizona. He's definitely getting older. I really like Ben Sinnott. One thing about him, he is one of the most versatile tight ends that there is in the NFL right now. He can be used as a H-back, a fullback, an inline tight end, a move tight end, a slot receiver. You could use him at X. That'll be Terry McLaurin's job, but this guy is very versatile. And if he can be the starting tight end, Zach Ertz is really old. Look at who he has to deal with in terms of his competition. Yes, he'll definitely be second behind Terry McLaurin, but none of these other guys scare me at all. I strongly believe in Ben Sinnott, and I think he's going to be worth much, much more next season. Once again, players that I think you can get for much cheaper mid-season, then you'll be able to get them likely for the rest of their careers until they are much, much, much older, when everybody is going to be bought for relatively cheap considering how talented they are DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Remember, Keenan Allen is gone probably next season, and he's 32 now. Then you have Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Yeah, they traded for Stephon Diggs, the Texans did. However, they voided the rest of his contract, so he's on a 1-year deal. He showed, in my opinion, evidence of decline, even though it's a little bit overstated this past season. Buy the dip on them. JSN. People act like 60-plus catches for 600-plus yards and 4 touchdowns as a rookie while being stuck behind Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf is a bad rookie season. By the way, he also had 2 game-winning touchdowns, the most for a rookie ever in the Common Era. Then you have Jalen Wright. He's the Raheem Mostert replacement. They traded up to get him. Remember, he had 4.3 yards after initial contact in college. This guy also had 19 carries of 15 plus yards, which only 15 other running backs this past season had more of, but he was the only one to do it with sub 150 carries. JJ McCarthy, yes, he's out for the season with a torn meniscus, but he's in a fantastic situation with an offensive-minded head coach, fantastic playmakers, and his adjusted completion percentage of 80% was second highest in the class. And finally, you have Ben Sinnott. He can be had for really, really cheap. He's being drafted at the end of the second round in Dynasty rookie drafts. His only tight end competition is an aging Zach Ertz, who just got kicked out of Arizona by Trey McBride. His wide receiver competition, besides Terry McLaurin, is De'Ami Brown, Zacchaeus, Luke McCaffrey. That doesn't scare me at all. And he has Jaden Daniels, who's looked pretty darn good. Now, once again, I can't guarantee that any of your league mates are going to be scared by any lack of production with these players this season. But if they are, take advantage of it. With that being said, if you like what you've heard, please like and subscribe. It lets me know that you want to see more videos like these. I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist. Thank you and have a good day.